What kind of mind-bending suspense thriller can make the story reverse again and again with an ending that is even more unexpected? On a remote, small-town highway, a man named Nick is driving Laura toward the city center. At this moment, the two are still chatting and laughing, but in the next second, a small car suddenly approaches from the front, while at the same time, a moose crosses the road. Startled, Nick sharply turns the steering wheel to avoid the moose, but ends up crashing into the oncoming car. When the two get out to check, the driver of the small car has already died on the spot. Nick immediately plans to call the police, but Laura hurriedly stops him. If they call the police, their relationship will be exposed. It turns out that Nick runs a tech company, which is thriving. Laura is a somewhat well-known photographer, and both of them are already married. They had both used business trips as an excuse, secretly coming to this remote mountain lodge to exercise and work out, hiding it from their families. But unexpectedly, such an accident happened on their way back, and once the police were called, both of them would be completely ruined. Laura tells Nick that on such a remote highway, no one knows what happened here, and everyone will simply think it was an accident caused by the small car hitting a moose. After weighing the pros and cons, the two decide to leave, but Nick discovers that his car will no longer start. At the same time, Laura notices that a vehicle below is heading toward them. Seeing that the situation is bad, Laura quickly comes up with a plan. She hurriedly lays the small car driver flat, then takes out a notebook from the glove compartment, pretends to be the small car driver, and acts as if she is negotiating the accident with Nick. At this time, the passing vehicle curiously stops, and the man asks if they need help. Laura quickly explains that the two cars collided because of a moose crossing and that they can settle it themselves. But at this moment, the small car driver's phone suddenly rings, and Laura hurriedly picks it up, hangs up, and pretends it was an insurance company calling. The bloodstains left inside the car make Laura grow increasingly nervous. She quickly stands in the spot where the blood had dripped, and the passing driver does not notice anything unusual and then leaves. But Laura casually slips the driver's phone into her own pocket. After the passerby leaves, Laura knows they cannot simply walk away, because a witness has seen them here, and they must deal with the body of the small car driver and the vehicle. Nick drives the small car to find a place to dispose of it, while Laura stays in the car and calls for roadside assistance. By nightfall, Nick finds a reservoir, locates a hidden corner, and pushes the car into the water. After Laura's car is repaired, she picks up Nick, but at this moment, Laura looks terrified. It turns out that after Laura called for rescue, something completely unexpected happened. The rescuer, Thomas, tells her that the engine sensor is faulty and that her car needs to be towed to his repair shop. Thomas tows the car and brings Laura to his home, and Thomas's wife warmly invites Laura inside for a cup of coffee. But the photos on the wall make Laura deeply uneasy, because the boy in the pictures is the small car driver who was just hit. At this time, Thomas tells Laura that her car is already repaired, and that he and his wife have just received a call from their son Danny's friend, asking whether Danny is at home. It turns out that the phone call Laura hung up earlier was from Danny's friend. Thomas's wife senses that something is wrong and quickly calls her son, and only then does Laura realize that the phone is in her pocket. As the phone rings, Laura hurriedly presses the standby button and hides it inside the couch. Thomas and his wife follow the sound and come over. When the wife calls again, Thomas finds Danny's phone inside the couch, and the couple assumes their son left it at home and does not think much of it. But when Laura prepares to drive away, Thomas notices that she has adjusted the driver's seat, and this small action arouses his curiosity. For safety's sake, Laura comes up with another new idea. They decide to sell the car to a dismantling plant to have it scrapped, and then the two part ways. After returning, Nick immediately reports to the police that his car was stolen from the parking lot. He pretends that he has just returned from a business trip, and then explains everything to his wife. But only a few days later, Danny's disappearance is reported in the news, and the police quickly find Nick. It turns out that according to Thomas's statement, the license plate number of the car he rescued is officially registered under Nick's name. Through the road marks, the police discovered traces of a collision between two vehicles, and because Laura did not give her real name to Thomas, the officers want to find out who the woman in the sketch is. Nick says that he does not know her. Nick's lawyer also brings up the claim that the car was stolen from the parking lot, but the police say Nick cannot provide parking ticket evidence. Nick explains that he simply lost it in his pocket. Seeing this, the lawyer counters that the license plate number is only Thomas's testimony and lacks physical evidence, and thus the matter ends inconclusively. Under the lawyer's questioning, Nick admits that he is involved in the incident. To avoid affecting his company, Nick has the lawyer fabricate an alibi showing that he was on a business trip, and the case is temporarily put to rest until a corporate banquet, when Thomas sneaks into the hotel under a false identity and confronts Nick. It turns out that when Nick was taken to the police station for questioning, Thomas was also there. After Danny's phone was unlocked, they discovered that shortly before Thomas brought Laura home, Danny had used his phone, meaning the phone phone could not possibly have been left at home, and Laura's adjustment of the seat proves that she was not driving before the breakdown, so her lie must have been to protect an accomplice. But the police do not believe them, and Thomas suspects that this person is Nick. When Thomas asks Nick for a lighter, Nick does not realize that his lighter has already betrayed him, because while repairing the car, Thomas had discovered identical marks in the driver's seat. Thomas urgently asks Nick where his son Danny really is, but Nick denies it emotionally, and Thomas is soon escorted out of the hotel due to his false identity. Nick possesses a forged business trip alibi, and the police will never believe Thomas. But a news report attracts Nick's attention, stating that Danny is no longer considered a murder victim. It turns out that the police discovered Danny had embezzled funds at the bank where he worked, and they suspect he fled in fear of punishment. But how could this be? Confused, Nick immediately seeks out Laura. It turns out that to completely eliminate the problem, Laura exploited the fact that her husband is a senior executive at a bank. While her husband was working from home, she secretly took out the transaction device and transferred a large sum of money into Danny's account. Danny's wallet was also secretly taken when they hid him in the trunk. Nick believes Laura's actions are far too extreme, and the two part on bad terms. But at this moment, Nick notices a man outside staring at him, and the man is the same driver who passed by at the accident scene. Soon after, Nick receives a letter containing a recording and photos of the location where Danny was pushed into the water. The passerby demands an outrageous sum of hush money, otherwise he will expose everything. To prevent the truth from coming out, Nick has no choice but to bring the money and meet Laura at the designated train station. Then Laura receives a call from the passerby, instructing them to take the train to the Lijing Hotel. He has already booked room 75 for them and tells them not to bring their phones. When the two arrive at the designated room, they see no sign of the driver and can only continue waiting. Soon, however, Nick, who did not discard his phone, receives a text message sent from Laura's phone, proving that Laura had asked him to come to the hotel. It is obvious that this is a trap. When they prepare to pack up and leave, a pair of dark hands suddenly restrains Nick from behind, smashes him into the glass, and knocks him unconscious. And then Laura also meets misfortune. When he wakes up, police knocking is already heard outside, and blood-stained furnishings are scattered on the floor. Nick then discovers Laura lying dead on the ground. As Nick cries for help, the police forcibly break in. The officers immediately restrain Nick, and Nick insists that he did not do it. But after investigation, the police find no signs of forced entry on the doors or windows. Because in winter, the hotel removes window handles and locks them, only staff with special tools can open them, and there are no pry marks outside, and the door chain was locked from inside, meaning no third party could have entered. Suspected by police, Nick is quickly taken away, but due to lack of solid evidence, he's released on bail. After his release, Nick is placed under police surveillance at the hotel. To clear his name, Nick consults his lawyer, who recommends a specialist in such cases, Goodman, and everything previously described is only Nick's own oral account. Goodman believes Nick has not told the full truth because his story is full of loopholes. Goodman immediately questions how the passerby knew where Danny's body was disposed. Nick explains that he heard noises while pushing the car and suspects the driver had already noticed bloodstains at the crash site. The driver secretly observed and saw Nick pushing the car into the water. But even so, Nick cannot escape the crime of disposing of a corpse. And the text message makes no sense, since the driver wanted money yet did not take it. And how the driver freely entered and exited a sealed room is something Nick cannot explain in court. Nick asks Goodman how to avoid these problems, and Goodman immediately provides a response plan. They can speculate that the blackmailer is not the passerby, but Danny's father, Thomas, because Thomas had long suspected Nick, giving him strong motive. But how can Thomas vanish from a sealed room without leaving traces? Goodman tells him a classic case. She says the answer may lie in the police file photos, which Nick must examine. Goodman soon points to the hotel employee behind Nick during his arrest. This woman is Thomas's wife. Goodman deduces that this was all Thomas's scheme, and the photos and recording were bait. Nick followed the instructions and exposed both himself and Laura. After Laura discarded the phone, Thomas retrieved it and followed them to the hotel. With his wife's cooperation, Thomas infiltrated the room in advance. The wife first opened the adjacent closet window, then handed the opening tool to Thomas. Thomas hid in the wardrobe, waiting for the two to arrive, then sent the text message. When they prepared to leave, Thomas emerged and knocked Nick unconscious. He then killed Laura and wiped Nick's fingerprints onto the furnishings, deliberately leaving the money to frame him. Other guests heard the noise and knocked, so Thomas used the tool to open the window, climbed outside, and pulled it shut. He then edged along the eaves into the adjacent dressing room with the pre-opened window. After entering, he locked the window and returned the tool. As police arrived, Thomas seized the opportunity to leave. When officers restrained Nick, Thomas's wife secretly locked the previously opened window, creating the perfect crime. But then Goodman learns that prosecutors have located the witness driver. This testimony can only clear Nick of Laura's murder, not Danny's disposal. Goodman proposes another hypothesis. Nick has a business trip alibi. They can frame everything on Laura, making her the sole planner who fabricated Danny's embezzlement escape. The license plate is only indirect evidence, and the hotel incident becomes Laura's trap, making Danny an innocent victim. To make police believe Laura disposed of the body, they can plant her belongings in the car and anonymously report it. But Nick doubts this, since the witness saw him. Goodman then admits that the witness is fabricated, and the prosecution found no witness. At the same time, Nick tells Goodman he already knew Thomas was behind everything at the hotel, but stayed silent to test her skills. And he admits that when pushing the car, Danny was still alive, yet he chose to push him into the water anyway. This brutal act earns Goodman's harsh condemnation, enraging Nick. But Goodman suddenly shifts tone, stating that Nick is too easily provoked. To preserve her perfect courtroom record, she suspects Nick still hasn't told the whole truth. If their roles were reversed, everything would make more sense. Laura invited Nick, questioned Danny's embezzlement, and Nick took Danny's wallet. The embezzlement was fabricated through his lawyer. At the crash, Laura wanted to call police, but Nick stopped her, forcing her into this nightmare. Goodman produces a medical report proving Laura developed acute anxiety disorder afterward. Tormented by guilt, Laura decided to confess to Danny's parents. To compensate them, she lured them to the hotel and devised a plan. She used the public phone booth to call Nick, telling him that the witness driver had discovered their secret and wanted hush money, asking him to bring the cash and come to the hotel with Laura for the meeting. To make Nick believe that the witness truly existed, Laura had also set up a timed text message in advance. When Nick arrived at the hotel, Laura told him her plan, and only after seeing the message did Nick realize that he had fallen into a trap. Faced with Laura's persuasion, Nick instead developed malicious intent. He grabbed a decorative object from the table and smashed it toward Laura, causing her to lose her life. What he did not expect was that the neighboring guests outside had heard the commotion. When he tried to escape through the window, he found that it could not be opened at all, and Nick also did not delete the text message he had received because he believed it would instead benefit his explanation. Nick scattered the money all over the floor, trying to fabricate an illusion, then smashed himself into the glass to injure himself, pretending that a third party had appeared to clear his name. Goodman also told Nick that after something happened to Laura, Thomas and his wife rushed to the hotel and immediately knew what had occurred. She even took Nick to the window, revealing that the man across the way was Thomas, who had been monitoring Nick's every move, and that even he had been targeted by Thomas. Driven by curiosity, Goodman had taken on this case, wanting to uncover the truth of the matter, and before that, she had already investigated everything related to Thomas. At this moment, Nick still insisted that his version of events was workable, but Goodman told him that he had overlooked the details. She told Nick that the photo in the news report was fabricated because there was no way Thomas's wife should have appeared in the mirror. Only then did Nick realize how formidable Goodman was. Goodman told Nick that if he wanted to convince the judge of his innocence, then he had to admit to her that he had indeed killed Laura. But at that moment, a voicemail from Nick's lawyer came through on the hotel room phone, asking why he could not get through to Nick. Goodman then said that she was going out to rest for a while. Nick took out his phone and discovered that it had already been turned off, and he was still completely unaware of how serious the situation had become. When he connected the call, it turned out that the lawyer had found the eyewitness, and that the driver had been bought off, securing his alibi. But while the two were talking, a piercing noise suddenly came through. Their signal was interfered with, and ink began to leak from the pen in Nick's hand. When Nick moved the pen away, he discovered the words Goodman had written on the note, filled with harsh criticisms of him. Only then did Nick sense that something was wrong. When he unscrewed the pen, he found that a listening device had been installed inside. The reason his phone had been unable to get through was that Goodman had turned it off after speaking with the lawyer. Meanwhile, Goodman had already arrived at the hotel across the street and found Thomas, and a shocking scheme was finally laid bare before Nick. It turned out that Goodman was actually Thomas's wife in disguise, which also explained Nick's initial confusion over how she had arrived there in advance. All of this manipulation was designed to extract the location where Nick disposed of the body and the truth behind his killing of Laura. When the real Goodman rushed to Nick's location, everything was already too late, and Nick ultimately could not escape the judgment of the law.